All right, we're going to talk a little bit about a new unit that we're starting here, and that's vector design. Now, for the most part, we've been doing a lot of work with the idea of bitmaps or JPEGs, and vector design is a little bit different. And for this unit, we're going to be focusing on CorelDraw, although some of you may be familiar with Adobe Illustrator, which does kind of the same thing. So I'm going to start just by looking at two graphics here. Now, if you guys wanted to get, for example, the Pepsi logo, I would imagine you'd jump onto Google and you would sort of do a search for Pepsi. Well, the only problem with that is that every image that comes up is going to be a JPEG or it might be a PNG. You're not really going to find a lot of vectors offhand, especially if you just use Google Images. Now, for the most part, that's not a problem. If you're just putting this on a report, you're putting it into a document, into a PowerPoint, something like that, a JPEG is probably going to work okay. But when it comes to printing or doing a few other things, vectors are far superior. In fact, anytime you're designing a logo, you're putting together a t-shirt design, you're doing, I don't know, custom embroidery, you're using a CNC machine, or even a 3D printer, you're using vector designing. Now, we're going to focus on 2D vector designing, but if you've ever used a program like Mudbox or 3D Studio, that is essentially 3D vector design. So let's talk about the difference. A bitmap, which is like a JPEG or a PNG, and there's a variety of other ones, is made up of little pixels. And even though from afar it looks decent, it looks okay, maybe a little jagged, when you zoom in, you start noticing that it's actually a bunch of little squares. And again, that's okay if you're just displaying it on a monitor, on a web page, or maybe on a report. But when you get into larger scale, the problem is that if you were to stretch this logo out, it's going to start to get blurry. Now, a vector design is not made up of pixels, but instead it's made up of lines. And those lines actually are very, very good about never getting distorted or never getting blurry because there's not pixels. In fact, you can zoom in forever and you'll never actually see any pixels because they're all based on lines. And because of that, you can zoom in forever. You can make this as large as you want. And when you talk about maybe getting something printed professionally, like on a t-shirt, or if you want something embroidered, you have to actually supply them vector art. Okay, we'll look at another example here. This is the Subway logo. So I've got two examples here. Both of them look very similar. If I zoom into the top one, you can see that this obviously is a vector because it is very, very clean. And whereas down here, as I zoom in, it gets ugly, so this must be a bitmap. Now, when you look at it like this, you would say that there are three colors: white, green, and yellow. And that's true, especially in the vector. It's the only three colors you have. However, when you look at the bitmap, technically, if you look at this, because it gets kind of ugly and you get all those pixels, there are multiple shades of green in there. There are multiple shades of yellow, and there's even varying degrees of shades of white. So this is not a super clean look, although when you zoom out, it seems okay. The other nice thing about vector design is that you can actually break things apart. So when I select Subway here, if you look down here at the bottom of your program, it says this is a group of 4 objects. Okay, well, if I right-click this and choose Ungroup Objects, then I click off it, I can actually see that this is made up of the way, the sub, which I can't see because it's white, it's down there, and the actual background. And I guess technically it's got the trademark in there too, which I could pull off. Now I'm going to undo that and put them all back together. Because it's laid out like this, you actually have a lot of options. So for example, I could just click that one group, which we know is the way, and say, you know what, I think that should actually be pink. Now it's a pretty terrible color combination, but it's that easy. Is I could take sub and say, okay, I want that to be blue, and then I want this background to be green. And then this is just terrible, and I would not allow you to submit something like that. You'd actually have to use a real color scheme. But hopefully you get the idea of how easy it is to manipulate things when you're dealing with vector. And then when you're done with things, you can actually select all of them again, right-click it, and choose Group Objects. And now it's easy to just move around, and those are stuck together. If you ever want to actually see what's involved in a group, you can go up to Window, Dockers, and you can choose the Object Manager here. And what that does is it actually shows you that I've got a bitmap, that's this guy right here, and then I've got something here, which is the group of 4 objects. And when I click the plus sign, I can see that it's made up of a curve, which is yellow. It's got a curve, which is white, another curve, which is white, and a curve, which is that green. So all of these are known as curves. Okay, and we're going to talk about how to trace these in a bit. But the last thing I just want to show you is that you can also, when you're doing a vector design program here, you can actually change the view. Right now this is called the normal or maybe the enhanced view, where it looks like what you actually want. However, if you go up to view here, you can change it to wireframe. And when you break it down now, you can see that this is just kind of this grayscale. It's just showing that's a bitmap. But up here, you can actually see all the different pieces as they sit together. And then if I were to right click and ungroup it again, I can separate those out. And there are reasons why sometimes you might want to see this in the wireframe mode. But for now, just know that you can go back and forth by using the view. Okay, the next step is going to be actually creating some. So we'll do another tutorial for that.